That guest lives in Prague, Czech. He freelances as a developer, an architect for D365 F&O, and he has over 20 years of experience. He's a member of the Dynamics 365 community engagement team, and he's been a top contributor in their forums for years. In fact, he's the leader with lifetime contributions of over or nearly 26,000 posts. On top of this, he's a moderator in many forums and is considered to be a hero throughout the D365 F&O world. Please welcome Martin Dráb. Good morning to you. Good evening from my end. How are you?
Hey Chris, thank you for inviting me. Yeah, I'm fine, of course.
Tell me what's life like in Czech. I haven't visited there myself. I haven't had the good fortune. What's it like for you? You're living in the city or outside?
Yeah, well, I think life is good here. I actually lived in UK and a few other places, and I was looking for going home again. And now I live at a suburb of Prague. So Prague has like 1 or a bit more than 1 million of people. Oh, it's reasonable size, and I'm like, at the edge with lots of nature around. So yeah, I like it.
Okay, so is Prague known for awesome food, the architecture, the beer? Like, what is the thing that makes Prague so special?
I think that most people come for architecture. The old town is really nice. It survived Second World War in good shape, which can't be said about many places like in Poland or Germany. So that's the main reason. Yeah, of course, there are also people coming for cheap beer, which is not that cheap anymore as it used to be, but still, better than in many other places. When Czech people complain about prices of beer outside, I said, okay, if you want cheap beer, you shouldn't leave.
Yeah, I guess so. We always complain about the things that we have. So then you were obviously brought up in Czech, and then you went and did your travels. Tell us a little bit about your childhood. What were the things that resonated with you about growing up in this part of Europe, and how did that help you as you went into the job career?
Yeah, well, when I was like 6, the communist era ended, so it's something like I remember a little bit. But yeah, it was, when I was older, I thought that it would be a shame if I didn't actually leave the country to live abroad for some time, because my parents didn't have the opportunity. And it's like, I don't know, 100 kilometers from my home city to Austria.
Yes.
But you couldn't go there, or not easily.
Yes.
So yeah, that was something that I felt like, okay, I really should do it if and that's something that people try to
It's only an
achieve.
hour, 1 hour's drive, really, right? You could just drive there on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, and especially when we actually built the highway there, which is still
Yes.
not the case. But yeah, it's very close. And they were like, looking at the hills, and they said, okay, this is already in Austria, but well, it's behind the Iron Curtain. You can go there.
Man, I remember reading about Soviet-style apartments where they were extremely well measured, and they worked out how tall a person was, the way the kitchen was constructed, or the individual bedrooms. They were very specific and tightly constructed so that it was maximize the space. Sorry, the number of people that could live in that area. So each apartment was small, and they could fit more in just because of that. It wasn't as wasteful as the Western style apartments. Is that something you've lived in, or was that gone by the time you had arrived?
Yeah, well, there was, I don't know, how is it called in English? They built lots of like really brick-like buildings with like I lived in a house with 13 floors,
Yes.
and it was like prefab concrete blocks that were
Yes.
assembled together, and you
Yes.
had like all quarters difficult just from this kind of building. It
Yes,
looked
yes.
horrible. Looked horrible, and it was all gray. Now they at least painted it in bright color, so it looks a bit different. Yeah, but you had like lots of gray boxes, one next to
Those are the
each
ones I'm
other.
thinking of.
So that wasn't nice. It was not that bad at some other places.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's also I where I grew up originally. I don't know until I was 11 or something. Living in 6th floor in this kind of building, but not in like huge area that would be composed just of these kind of houses. But yeah, that's something I really don't like. But yeah, the life can be reasonably good there. It's yeah, and often
It's
these were like new houses at the time. But yeah, well, you have lots of people packed together, and no one really cares about the surroundings. So not ideal.
and so you did your schooling there, and did you get an idea that you were so good at technology? What made you fall in love with coding?
I don't know. Yeah, I started with HTML at high school, and slowly I got into PHP and to databases because you need some backend for it.
Yes.
Then I studied Java at university, and yeah, it was it worked for me. So yeah, then as I mentioned, I got into job in Accepta
Yes.
during my studies, and then I continued after that. And yeah, that's what I'm doing for 20 years now.
And did you find a big jump from, when you do PHP or Java, if there's a certain way you're coding? You and I were chatting about your editors being so fancy in those languages, and then you jump to X++ and it's a bit more clunky. And how did you find that transition? Were you able to take your coding knowledge and just start, or did you have to reimagine how object-oriented stuff works?
Yeah, for object-oriented design, what I learned in Java and later in C Sharp, so that helped me a lot.
Yes.
Basically, at least at that time, almost no AX developers were good in object-oriented design, and you can see it in code all the time.
Mm.
So understanding these principles and interfaces and lots of other things that helped me a lot. That already gave me huge advantage in comparison with many X++ developers. So this was definitely useful. PHP that was it started being started playing with objects, so it was something else, and that didn't help me with X++ that much. But there are still things like well, the more you know, the more languages and concepts you know, it may help you later some unrelated things. So like when I grasped like dynamic taping in PHP, that later helped
Yes.
me learning some other languages that use similar principles. So you don't have like fixed type or at least not a declaration type. That's not much related to X++. Regarding tooling, that was frustrating. I really had much better tools for even like free editors for PHP, and not mentioning like JBuilder. So that wasn't a good experience. But yeah, well, you live with what you have. Later, I also built some development tools to help with certain tasks. Not that much, like you can't do much with the editor as such. But yeah, until these days, I complain about things that doesn't work well with tooling or the language itself. But like comparison with C Sharp and Visual Studio isn't, or C Sharp tools in Visual Studio isn't really fair, because the investment to C Sharp and the number of people that uses this language, that's completely different. So you can't expect that much investment to X++.
I love C Sharp and I code in it, and I feel I can do anything with it. Whereas with X++, I know I'd have to break out the C Sharp to really make it work. Okay, so when you first arrived at your new job and you're learning Exapta, did they put you on to maintenance, tasks? Did they find that you have to start right at the bottom?
Oh, well, it's 20 years ago. I don't really remember. I know that I got some basic training. Yeah, well, it helped me with some things, obviously, and then like the guy didn't really know like object-oriented programming, so we were even some discussions about like, say, okay, this doesn't make sense. But regarding the tasks, the first tasks I got, I don't know. I remember one thing where I did some difficult investigation of why something doesn't work as expected, and you go through thousands of classes and you have absolutely no idea what's going on, and that's something I had to give up at that point, because simply if you have no idea what about all those frameworks and what this class is for and what this table does, it's extremely difficult to make some sense of it. Oh, I'm much better in it these days, but yeah, I understand that when junior developers struggle with these things, I remember that I was in the same position, and so it's just complicated if you just can't say like, okay, I know that this part does this thing and it's not related to my current task. I can completely ignore this part of code. If you have no idea, it's just extremely difficult.
It's spaghetti.
Mm,
Spaghetti.
mm.
How did you go as a developer? Because once you learn a company's set of custom code, did you have to give it up like a parent gives up a baby or something that's it was so difficult to leave to the next company? Or do you find the move from company to company very, very easy for you to do?
Well, I didn't really feel like it's a problem, at least
Yes.
in past. Maybe if I worked like for ISV building a product from beginning, that may be more difficult. But those implementations, I don't really care. Very often it was like as a freelancer, or I'll even originally as employee, I joined a project to do some implementation. Then the implementation was done more or less, and then either or then there is not enough work, so either I move to another project anyway, or sometimes the company doesn't work in another project and I need to leave the company. So as a freelancer, it's completely clear, you are hired for some piece of work and then you move on. So for these implementations, I don't really feel like I want to stay there and continue, like, okay, let's go and look for another challenge. And it's fun. Like every company is completely different industries, different requirements, different issues. Sometimes it's difficult to grasp what the particular piece of business is about, but it's cool to see like, it's completely different than the previous project.
Yes, yes. I've noticed that you actually are starting to move towards the Power Platform. There are so many things that you could do in code. What's making you move towards a no-code, low-code type environment? What's the push for you?
Oh, there are definitely. Oh, I see like two big areas there. One is really what most people imagine when you say Power Platform. So you build a Power Automate flow or you build a Power App.
Yes.
So that's something you quickly build and you already immediately have something to use. Like the Power App, perfect example. You have app in your phone or somewhere. You can use it to see and type in data. So this is useful in many scenarios, especially in those like, rapid development or self-serve development, like automate, like I want to extract data and send email every week, ideal case for Power Automate. But then there is also the platform around Dataverse as a backend, which may be more or less hidden to like builders of Power Apps or so. That's something I see like super important, because we have more and more integration with FNO, for example, with virtual entities. You can easily get well, things from FNO to Dataverse with very little effort. And then there is so many things that you can do in Dataverse for data validations and writing plugins in C#, and you have like APIs. And yeah, then you can quickly get into a situation that what Microsoft is trying to achieve basically is that, okay, why I should write it just for FNO using FNO specific stuff if I can use Dataverse and I can incorporate data from other sources and I can offload these things from FNO database, and yeah, I can utilize directly connectors for Dataverse in Power Apps, etc. So yeah, I think that or sorry, just one thing. Microsoft
Sure.
spoke for years about Dataverse being this thing, and yeah, I was skeptic for many years because it wasn't there. It wasn't good enough, but I think we are getting there now.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of infrastructure between the FNO and then the actual database environment where there's constant synchronization going, and there's a lot inside the Power Platform Admin Kit where you can help to release some of the problems that are occurring in that synchronization. Have you had experience where it's stabilized and it is not so much of a problem, or are you seeing a constant trickle of issues in your Dynamics 365 community engagement?
Yeah, I'm not really involved in these things that much at the moment. And what I did with virtual entities was all right. But that's not synchronization. That's basically like a view of FNO APIs.
Mm-hmm.
I never really worked much with Dataverse, but what I've heard was not very good. I don't know if it improved recently, but lots of people complained about it's very difficult to get it working and debug. But yeah, that's what I've heard. That's not my
Mm-hmm.
own experience. I don't know.
Yeah, well, tell us about your D365 community experience that you actually are quite active in that, and there's a lot of people referring to you as the person to go to. Tell us about your involvement.
Yeah, well, I started, or what I do mainly now is contributing to forums, and
Yes.
that's something I started already, well, some time ago. I don't know. There was a Usenet forum for Accepta, real old stuff. Yeah, and then and the new Dynamics community site was created. I resisted a bit before started using it. That
Yes.
happened at some point, or when originally I tried to respond really, when I was sure about the answer, but I was sure that I had something to say. But with the new community site, at some point, it felt like there is no one responding at all. So I started being a bit more active and just giving people at least some suggestion. So even if I didn't have the complete solution, at least help them a bit,
Yes.
so they get at least some some response, some help. And yeah, well, then it happened that I continued doing the contribution in forums still. Yeah, and it's partially moderation, like
Mhm.
saying people what information they need to add, moving stuff into right forums. Sometimes like giving some suggestions or complete solutions, explaining some small pieces. Yeah, I people what information they need to add, moving stuff into right forums. Sometimes like giving some suggestions or complete solutions, explaining some small pieces. Yeah, I also have a blog which I used to
The Shum.
use quite a lot. Recently,
Yes.
I'm really bad in it. I would need more time, like sit down half a day to think about the problem. I can't find it. So yeah, forum is easier. It I can just in a minute I can give someone a reply. But yeah, block is good that you can go much deeper. But if Or there are people who are able to write a blog post in 5 minutes, and I'm not one of them. I usually choose a deep technical topic, and I need to spend lots of time, testing different things. So yeah, it's more
Yes.
difficult.
You're a freelancer. Tell us about the life of freelancing. Most people obviously have a 9 to 5 job. They know what they're doing every day. Do you find nowadays that you love the gaps between contracts, or do you find you love the fact that there's multiple clients? And how does that make you feel financially secure? Like who's going to give me work today?
Oh, lots of questions there. In general, it works fine for me. Yeah.
Yes.
There is still lots of work around. Sometimes it's difficult to find the right project at the right time. I'm getting lots of offers, but most of them I don't really like. So I'm looking for projects where that makes sense to me. But in general, it works. I don't mind gaps. Sometimes, like for before accepting my last contract, I really had to convince them that I need a month break just to relax and to come with new energy and not tired and exhausted from my last project, because it sometimes feels like that. You work, and you need a break to come with new ideas. So what was the other question?
Well, what's it like? You obviously have a bunch of clients. Did you used to go back and maintain code from a decade ago?
And in general, I don't work on like for many companies at once. Usually, I go I get hired on implementation project, and I work mainly on that project. And sometimes it's really old code base that happens, but it's not like that I created or created a solution for someone and I keep maintaining it forever. I am hired, like, basically, they buy my time for implementation, usually implementation, and then when we are happy with the situation, then I moved on. I
Yes.
also do sometimes some trainings, but it's usually short. I used to have some support or like contracts in a way that people called me when they had a problem, but yeah, I don't really like it because yeah, I feel like I'm already quite busy with the implementation, and adding, having more other work and the context switching. That's uh,
That's the big time waste, right? Yeah.
lots of time, and people are chasing you because they need to solve something immediately, and
Yes.
you need to figure out what happened since you talked to them for the last time. So yeah, I really try to limit this. I used to do it more, but don't like it now. So rather, I am working on one project for implementation, and sometimes I go somewhere and give a training for a few days, but not like having several implementation at once. That would be horrible.
Makes sense. What are you finding with customization? Like, if I go back, you've been an MVP now for like 11 years. If you go right back 11 years and you say, what has been the level of customization? Have you seen it decrease and therefore you're using more, or other people are using the config more? Or have you noticed customization's the same? People want a million lines of code to be cut.
I don't know. There is still lots of customizations, so I think maybe the shift is in what we do now. That maybe some
Okay.
things that needed customization before are not needed anymore, but there are still new
Okay.
requirements. So, mm, well, still lots of work.
And so we're doing like business process changes, reporting. Is it the way forms are working? Is it overcoming bugs?
Well, I'm currently not involved much into in reporting, for example, and that
Mhm.
was a big topic of, well, on most implementations, and it changed a
Yeah.
lot. It changed a lot. Morphics, or I spent lots of time learning how to do things efficiently in more fixed reports.
Mhm.
That's something
Mm.
that people don't know about anymore.
No.
And what surprised me, at least on my projects where I worked, I expected much wider adoption of Power BI because
Yes.
I think it's really a powerful tool. SSRS reports are fine for certain scenarios, but Power BI can do much more and some things more easily and have some extra benefits, like you can easily integrate the information from other sources. And I don't
Mhm.
see it used that much. I'm sure that it's not true for all projects, but at least where I work, I think it's a lost opportunity. I think the adoption will be bigger. The easier it is, like get data to Dataverse and from Dataverse to Power BI, these kind of things. I think that people will realize sooner or later that there is new world of reporting and data analytics that they can use.
Do you know, Martin, on that point, is it two possibilities? The first possibility, is it that we have a generation that maybe isn't comfortable drilling down and choosing the options in a cube and getting, the slices that they want? It's like thinking through, how do I get this data? Maybe the current generation loves the SSRS report, like it produces these columns with these rows. I look in this corner, that's the figure I use. Like, therefore it'll change over time. Or is it, if I go to an AR or an AP person, they simply want the specific types of report because that's what they reconcile to, or that's what they copy and paste a certain row and give it to their manager. It's not about research, it's about fixing, doing a task in their business process. So I'm wondering whether or not there really is an opportunity in everyday process for the average person.
I think that users are used to, like, you have a piece of paper and business analysts, so they ask for it, and like functional consultants, they are also used to these kind of things, so they don't try to convince them that different business process would be maybe better. So then people get this list of papers, and they look for information that they want, and when they see that
Mhm.
this report doesn't work for them, then either they give up, or they export it to Excel and meddle with the data, or they make a
Yes,
request to create a new report,
yes,
while they could just fine tune some parameters in Power BI, for example, or you
yes.
can give them completely different visualization, uh, like, I don't know. Of course, it's not for each kind of report, but in some cases, instead of having a huge column of data, maybe you would like to get, I don't know, a graph that shows you, what's the key point
Mhm.
here, where you should focus. You can click on it, you will drill down to details, and this is really useful in like analytic scenarios. And with SSRS, well, you can't really do that.
No.
So like, yeah, for your invoice, SSRS is great. For, like, I don't know,
Yes.
controlling purposes, or analyzing trends in data.
Age
Yeah.
trial balance, profit and
Mm.
loss, balance sheet. These are all standard reports, yeah. Imagine if, man, consider this. Imagine if with Power BI, if someone was generating like a balance sheet and they excluded a bunch of accounts accidentally because they didn't understand they were selecting and unselecting. And they said, our total profit for this month is 20 million. Then when you go in, you realize they had not selected all the accounts. And it's actually 23 million. And that's the fear I have with Power BI, that the person driving it may not have the skills to understand what they're reporting on.
Well, yeah, of course. Every time you have a graph or table of data, you need to know what's behind it. If
Mm.
that's like, every time politicians show you a graph on screen and you have no idea what data is behind it, gives you no value, or intentionally, it's maybe intentionally misleading. So that's
Yes.
always
It's
need to understand that.
Yes, I think they last time in the US they showed us the inflation and they excluded rent and electricity and a couple of other things. And they said there's no inflation.
Yeah, so you can get any result you want.
Okay, so man, just assume I'm a young developer. I'm coming in. Aside from X++, I know C# does amazing things and it can interact with X++. Is there any path that a young developer should be choosing so that they actually have longevity as a developer in the D365 F&O environment?
Oh, well, I don't have universal answers to be honest, but yeah, I think from like today's point of view, I think it would make sense to actually come from the or do a bit different things that traditional X++ developers like myself. Yeah? So I usually sit down or write or we build solutions by writing X++ code and create forms in FNO or so and very often we don't really have that insight into datawares or other things like I work with Logic Apps and Azure stuff for some time. A lot of X++ developers don't know anything about the options that are in Azure. Oh, I think that maybe going from datawares or other things like I worked with Logic Apps and Azure stuff for some time. A lot of X++ developers don't know anything about the options that are in Azure. Oh, I think that maybe going from the direction of Power Platform, Dataverse, Power Apps, etc., and focusing on that part and just learning like what APIs, how to work with data entities, etc. in FNO, and covering rather the part in Power Platform and the interfaces without maybe going into details of I don't know all the little frameworks inside X++. That may be some competitive advantage because these are skills that companies now need, and lots of people, current developers, are not able or willing to go there. So that may be an
Yes.
advantage. But in general, like for long term, I think it's important to know concepts, to understand like for coding, like object oriented programming works, what are some, I don't know what I would call most important, but yeah, like really these things for what we have. We are now in cloud more or less, so things
Hmm.
about how you can design distributed systems, what what you can do, what you can't, or what, like I don't know, let's say I have distributed system. I want response time ideally
Hmm.
0. I want data all the time in sync in 0 time. I want everything consistent, and you can't get it, and it's not possible. So you need to know, okay, so maybe we will cache some data somewhere with some, so it won't be in sync all the time. We have things like
Yes.
eventually consistency, etc. Now I see a lot of people in FNO still design things like, okay, making a direct web service call is the only option how you can integrate between systems, and like message queues, or so it doesn't tell anything to them. And when I see design of integrations, people don't ask questions like, okay, what would be like reliability, what will happen if a message gets lost, how we will track what happens in this distributed system where the message, I don't know, got corrupted or something.
Yes.
So yeah, then when you know the principle, you can go and use different components, different systems, and you just need to learn how the particular things work. But you have like bigger picture, and okay, this is where it belongs in the system. These are the capabilities. This is the design pattern that I know, so I don't need to think about it. I just need to recognize it. So yeah, understanding these bigger concepts is really beneficial in long term because they don't change that often. While
Yes.
languages comes, new features are added in Azure. One service is what you use today. maybe will be deprecated next year, and a newer similar thing will be built. That doesn't matter that much. Still something to learn, but if you know the concepts, it's quite easy to figure out how to use it then.
Very true. You mentioned one thing about the interfacing, and if someone is to learn, I would totally agree that Azure and its services are fundamental to exiting or entry into D365. There are so many ways that a developer could make it easy. And one of the pain points as a project manager that I have with developers is if I go to them to say, solve this problem for me, import, export these files, do something, if they don't know what you're saying, I have to have 3 developers. One person sets up the Azure environment for it. Another person comes in and then they write the interface with Logic App, for example. And then lastly, the X++ person stays in their bubble. But I've met developers who can actually go across the 3. They can set up the resource in Azure. They can then write the quick Logic App, get the file into the right place, and then push that or pull that from X++. And they built the whole pipe. They test it, they understand if something's not working right, and then they fix it. It's wonderful to deal with someone who has that end-to-end ability, right? And even with C#, if they need to break into a different external environment, they're able to do that as well. So I agree with you on it. And then the second point you made was the way in which interfaces work. A colleague of mine many years ago showed me about loose coupling and expecting things to always break. And you raised that if you know that something can stop, start, how are you going to reconcile and make sure that you don't pull the same file in twice? Or how are you going to stamp the record with a unique ID so you know it's been processed? These sorts of things, like you're saying, can apply to any language.
And very often I see also like you need to integrate 2 systems FNO with something, and people design it as a direct web service call. And I always ask them, okay, so what if FNO is down for maintenance? What should happen? Will the other system stop working because it can't get the response from, or so usually the solution for me is like including something like message queue. So if we don't really need the response, we can put it into queue.
Yes.
And then later when the other system is live, it will start processing the data. And it's also good for like peak load distribution. So
Yes.
well, you just get longer queue and not the system under heavy load. These kind of things, some people need to think about it. And it just like you mentioned, designing across Azure FNO. So I can, for example, I can do things like this on my own, but people then have impression that okay, you can deal with all Azure, but yeah, this is just much bigger, and companies need to think about things like how we will manage resources, what will be our conventions, who will define security policies, who will be responsible for some auditing, how we will deal with cost, how when we develop something, how we will deploy it to production, will we have some auto scaling, etc. And that's not work for one person who also work as FNO developer. So companies really need to do these things. It's extra work. It needs extra skills, but otherwise, they can design things that will be very expensive, bad performing, and maybe security risk as well. So just ignoring it is not an option, or not a good option at least.
Yeah, definitely. When you're actually moving into production, the security issues and also the potential costs, if someone ticked on a feature or an option that that just really racked up the costs, it would be very surprising. Okay, so you've got these young people coming through. You're suggesting these options, which is the Azure, and also to understand the patterns for integrating with other systems. For yourself, have you found a specific thing, a superpower that you've got that has made your life over the last 20 years easier with Axapta?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, definitely what helps being curious. And so not just saying, okay, this works, so I'm happy with it. Do I understand why it works in this way or why
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't work? So going deeper and looking, okay, so where, how this framework figure out this value? Let's look into code because most of this operation framework is written in X++. I can go there, I can debug it. And when one understands how it's actually done, you are in a much better position. You can utilize options that you didn't even weren't aware of, or the limitations, what to watch for, where to go when you need to debug something. So that's something that takes time to. In some cases, you just say, okay, it works. I'm fine. I don't know why it works, but it works. Everyone is happy. Then I go and spend few hours sometimes understanding what exactly happened, what was the problem or why it started working. It may look like lost time, but it's actually the way how you can get better understanding, and yeah, that makes a difference between someone who knows a bit and someone who knows it on more expert level, I would say.
I get you. It seems like you're telling me that if you have curiosity, you're able to continue to drill down through the layers, and the things you learn and you pick up can actually help you later. It's an investment in yourself. And I can tell by your blog that you get down to the minute detail of a specific problem. And you only got there because you went through layer after layer that others probably would have given up and said, I can't fix this. But you kept going deeper and deeper. And then I guess that's a bit like a bank account. You're able to pull that up the next time there's a problem. You go, I know that particular operation or that particular parameter. It's one of the good things about AX or D365 that it does compound.
And
Nice
it
work, Martin.
feels to me that lots of developers don't go deeper enough. You get a requirement like, and when you click OK, something should happen. They go put it into click method on OK button,
Mhm.
and they don't really go into the existing logic, and they ignore like things like that. Okay, there is a class that has a method for this particular purpose, and there is database transaction that you should really put the code there. And yeah, if they don't do this kind of analysis, they can cause lots of issues. Like you end up with inconsistent database if you don't design transactions correctly. So yeah, people shouldn't just find the first place where it looks like it makes sense, but they should really understand what's going on behind.
Is there some sort of assessment for software development where you can actually say this is a level 1 developer, basic, or a level 9? I know with functional testing, they're able to very quickly certify you to a percentage level, but is there a percentage level you can get as a developer?
I never thought about these things. Yeah, there are surely things that are basic, things that are like some niche that no one normally use. But yeah, it depends a lot on what you're doing. For example, so like ISV solutions that needs to be used by many different implementations that may need a bit different approach than if you are doing implementation for your own. But yeah, like that I would go and classify someone. I can't imagine. Yeah, okay, I have some feeling about he knows it well or not. But I think that's usually sufficient. Yeah, and if you have someone who understands development, understands the principles, but doesn't understand this particular framework, for example, that's not a big problem. He can learn. Bigger problem is people who really don't really understand, for example, object-oriented development in general. Or what I see in forums sometimes are people who don't even know that they should split code into named methods, you get just a wall of code.
Okay.
That's a lack of understanding of design principles, and that needs much more work to solve. And some people are not really willing to do it. And those who are, well, it takes time. So it's a bigger problem than that you don't know some libraries or so that you can learn more easily.
I do know that once I find developers that I enjoy working with and do the job, I keep in touch with them for the rest of their life. I'll never let them go. So it seems in the D365 world, you've got to keep searching till you find your favorite developers and then take them with you from project to project. That's my current experience.
Yeah, sounds good.
Martin, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Thank you for inviting me. Have a good day.
Mobiz is a community-run organization. We believe in liberating people from the shackles of monotony, inspiring them to dream bigger and reach higher. We empower them to focus on the things that matter, growing their skills, solving new problems, and helping others on a global scale.
We eliminate manual work that stands between people and their future, preventing them from learning new technologies, unleashing their talents, and leaving a legacy that has a lasting impact.
Freedom doesn't wait. Join us at mobiz.com.